Welcome back to Cammie's English Corner. If you want to level up your English pronunciation, you're in the right place. I've pulled together all of my best pronunciation lessons and quick tips for today's perfect pronunciation masterclass to help you sound clear and confident in English. And I know today's masterclass is quite long, but make sure you stick around until the end so you don't miss out on some of the most common pronunciation mistakes I hear English learners make, and of course, how you can fix them. So as we do this, we're going to read through paragraph by paragraph and pause between each one so that we can really discuss all those teeny tiny details. After that, at the end, I will read it all through one last time so that you can use it as a mirroring practice yourself. With mirroring, you'll listen and repeat, and then listen again and repeat again until you feel comfortable. Okay, let's start. Were you a bookworm at school? Well, according to recent research from the US, reading fiction at a young age could give us a more complex view of the world and allow us to better understand other people's lives. Now let's look at this and find all the ways that we can connect some sounds and make it sound super fluent. One big thing to focus on is looking at the vowel sounds at the beginning and the end of the words. If you have a vowel sound at the beginning of a word, like you can connect it to the previous word. So instead of saying were you, and that way it'll sound very fluent. Same thing with the A. So obviously, A is a vowel sound, and same with U. So we're going to connect those as well. This is going to make kind of a U-wa sound. Were you a bookworm at school? And of course, with the A at the beginning of at, we will connect this. Bookworm at school. Now you'll notice between the T and the S, they're both consonant sounds. So we can put a separation between them. At school. Moving right along. With our well, we have a comma. So with the comma, we still will give it that space. Well, according to recent, and again, we have our vowel, so we will connect that. According to recent research. Now, I find a lot of my students with research will emphasize the wrong part and might say research, but you want to make sure that you emphasize the beginning. According to recent research from the US. And again, with the, we will connect it. The US. Reading fiction, Ada. Now you can hear with Ada, I don't do a strong T. I do almost a D sound. Ada. Reading fiction at a young age could give us a more. Again, we are still connecting. Give us and then usa and a more. Give us a more complex view of, again, connecting that, view of the world and allow us to better. With better, we're going to make these T sounds like a D. So better, understand other. Again, we're going to have that connection. Understand other people's lives. Sound good? Let's move on to the next paragraph. This is particularly true for literary fiction, which is generally considered serious stories that don't fit into specific categories like romance or science fiction. Literary fiction usually focuses on people's lives and the social and political issues that may affect them. So we've already talked about how to connect our vowel sounds. So let's focus on some other things in this paragraph. Okay, so when we look at these, you can see that we have these quotes right here with serious. When we're reading this out loud, or if we're trying to emphasize a topic like this, you don't have to do the hand gestures, but you do want to give that word more emphasis and do kind of a pause before and after, which is generally considered serious stories that don't fit blah, 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 blah. That way, the listener can know and almost picture the quotes around the word to know that it's something specific. Let's look at something else. You might notice that when I do the T in that, don't, and fit, I'm not saying that, don't, fit. I'm kind of cutting it off. I like to think of this as almost a karate chop at your throat. So instead of saying that, you are going to chop it. That, don't, fit. This is going to sound a lot more natural. So that don't fit. Now, here's the caveat to that. We do still have our vowel. So this will sound like fit into or fit into, fit into. If we're going to say it, it's almost like fit into, fit into. That don't fit into specific categories. Sound good? Let's look at some other things. Also, with literary, it is a T, but you can do it like a D sound. It'll sound more natural. Literary. Another thing that I hear a lot of people get a little confused about is our SES. They might just skip it and say focus, but you really want to say focuses, sizz at the end. Focuses. Sound good? On people's lives and the social and political. So again, there's another T that sounds like a D. Political issues that may affect them. And again, with that T at the end of that, we're going to make it like that karate chop. That may affect them. Awesome. Let's continue on to our next sentence. The researchers based their conclusions on 4 surveys of adults in the U.S. Here, I want to look at the ED on based. I hear this mixed up quite often where people say based, based. This is only going to be based, based. It will make the ST sound. The only time you'll do an id is if a word ends in T or D. Other than that, you want to listen for if that last letter is voiced, like Z, G, or if it's voiceless, S, K, P. If it is voiceless, you will make a T sound. So this word ends up being based, based. Okay, let's continue. In all 4 studies, participants were asked about the type of reading they do, as well as about a different aspect of the way in which they see the world and see themselves. Let's look at a few things in here. 1, with participants, there is an A, right? We see this A letter. but it's not participants, not like the pants that we wear. You'll actually say it like an I. Participants. Participants. We're asked about the type of reading they do, as well as about a different. You'll notice I do not use this middle syllable of different. It's not wrong to say it, but it's just not natural. So instead of making it a 3-syllable word of different, you'll just do 2 syllables. Different. Different. In which they see the world and see themselves. Let's move on. The first study found that among more than 350 Americans, increased reading of literary fiction when growing up was connected with greater psychological richness. This might mean having an open mind and trying to gain wisdom in life. Okay, so here when you're looking at numbers, with the number 350, there are 2 ways you can say it. 350 or 350. Both are fine. It's just up to personal preference. Also, you'll notice how I said increased. Increased. If this was a verb, we would say it a little bit differently. So increased, increased. But this is an adjective, so it's more like increased, increased. We're just changing the stress and our intonation for the word. So you really want to be careful when looking at these words to identify if it's a verb or if it's an adjective. So when we look at this, we're going to go like increased, increased. And again, with our psychological richness, it has the quotes, so we want to give it a little more emphasis with greater psychological richness. Okay, let's move on. In the second study, the researchers said that among around 2,200 university students, those who read literary fiction were less likely to simply accept authority. Okay, so you might have noticed throughout this, when I say the, usually I don't do the. It's kind of cut off. So it's more like the second. You're making your TH, and just going right into the next word. You don't have to say the second. The second. So it's very, very short. Also, with researchers, again, you want to make sure to emphasize the beginning part. Researchers. Now, with the word read, you really want to be careful to make sure that you're reading it as read with the past tense, past participle, whatever it is, rather than the present tense read. They're spelled exactly the same. So that's when you have to look at the context clues. Look at the words around it, and that way you can identify whether it's read or read. Okay, next paragraph. The third study found that reading any fiction as a young person gave people a sense of perspective and empathy. Around 1,500 participants were involved in this one. Now this paragraph, I want to look at the TH. We have all different kinds of THs in here, right? The, third, that, empathy, and this. So sometimes TH is voiced, sometimes it's voiceless. The key thing that you have to do with TH is stick your tongue between your teeth. It feels weird. I know. I get it. You feel like a weird snake, but you have to do it. If your tongue does not go between your teeth, and it's behind S. That's now an S sound. And we don't want an S sound because it's simply incorrect. If you were to say, the third study found that reading, and empathy, it's not correct. And so we really want to make sure that we are getting our tongue out. I know it's weird, but you just have to do it. The third study found that reading, empathy. Every single time you see the TH, you have to put your tongue between your teeth like a snake, right? That's just the way it is. Let's look at our next paragraph. Finally, based on results from the fourth study of around 1,000 people, the researchers concluded that people who read literary fiction early in life were more likely to have a complex worldview. Now, I want to look at this part where we have the hyphens. Okay? You'll notice that my voice and my intonation went down when we said this. When we have this extra bit of information, we want to change our intonation a little bit, just so the listener knows that it's a little extra sprinkle of information. Based on results from the fourth study of around 1,000 people, the researchers concluded, and so forth. Okay, so remember, you really want to have your intonation go down. That's the key thing from this paragraph. Moving right along. We're almost finished. Whether or not participants reported that they were currently reading literary fiction did not affect how complex their worldview was. This suggests that reading as a young person has more of an impact. Let's look at a few things in here. One big thing to note is right here where we have worldview was. So we have the vowel sounds and we have these W sounds. So when we have two sounds that are the same, view and then was, we'll connect it. It's going to sound like one word. Worldview was. We are not going to say worldview was. It's all together because it's the same sound. Their worldview was. Another thing that you might notice, oftentimes with these ENT sounds, instead of saying currently, I'll say currently, currently. So we're still going to have a stop, like that karate chop that we discussed earlier. Instead of current. Currently. Currently. You'll also hear this with the word like important. Important instead of important. Current. Currently. Another word that I want to look at is reported. Reported. So remember we talked about the ED earlier with the word based. With based, you don't say the E sound. But here we have our T. So because we have our T, we can give it the ID sound. And a little extra thing to make it sound more natural is you can make this T sound like a D. So it's not wrong to say reported, but to be natural, reported. Okay, we are almost finished. The authors said that fiction is a useful tool for understanding that the world is a complex place full of differences. So, we talked earlier in the previous paragraph about connecting the same sounds. We can see that here with authors and said. So instead of authors said and giving a space between them, it's the same sound. So we'll connect it. The authors said. Authors said. We also talked about the word different earlier and how we can cut out that middle syllable. It's the same here with differences. So we can cut that out. Instead of differences, just differences. And you want to make sure here with the CES that it has the SIS sound. Okay, final paragraph. We are almost finished. They believe it could even provide us with skills to live in democracies that include all sorts of different people. The end. So we have talked about all these different things, how we can connect, they believe it. Also, with our it, we can do that sort of karate chop. Believe it. They believe it could. They believe it could. So we're not going to do an it. It's not wrong, but it's not natural. They believe it could even provide us. So we have that connection. We have a connection here with could even provide us. And we can sort of connect our W's as well. Provide us with, and then skills to live in, democracies that include. So we're going to do this kind of connection. That include. And we don't need to do a hard T. That include. It'll be more like a D sound. That include. And we have our vowel sound. All. That include all. That include all, pause, sorts of. We're going to connect this as well. Different people. Okay, so now that we have gone through all the tiny little details for how to make this reading sound as natural and fluent as possible, I'm going to go through and read it all together. And you can use this for your mirroring practice. So let's begin. Were you a bookworm at school? Well, according to recent research from the US, reading fiction at a young age could give us a more complex view of the world and allow us to better understand other people's lives. This is particularly true for literary fiction, which is generally considered serious stories that don't fit into specific categories like romance or science fiction. Literary fiction usually focuses on people's lives and the social and political issues that may affect them. The researchers based their conclusions on 4 surveys of adults in the US. In all 4 studies, participants were asked about the type of reading they do, as well as about a different aspect of the way in which they see the world and see themselves. The first study found that among more than 350 Americans, increased reading of literary fiction when growing up was connected with greater psychological richness. This might mean having an open mind and trying to gain wisdom in life. In the second study, the researcher said that among around 2,200 university students, those who read literary fiction were less likely to simply accept authority. The third study found that reading any fiction as a young person gave people a sense of perspective and empathy. Around 1,500 participants were involved in this one. Finally, based on results from the fourth study of around 1,000 people, the researchers concluded that people who read literary fiction early in life were more likely to have a complex worldview. Whether or not participants reported that they were currently reading literary fiction did not affect how complex their worldview was. This suggests that reading as a young person has more of an impact. The author said that fiction is a useful tool for understanding that the world is a complex place full of differences. They believe it could even provide us with skills to live in democracies that include all sorts of different people. So, I hope you enjoyed today's demo lesson for my perfect pinpoint pronunciation practice and that this was helpful for you. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you later. Bye. Up close and personal pronunciation practice. Today, let's talk about how to properly pronounce the TH sound. So, in order to say it correctly, you have to get your tongue between your teeth. This, that, thought, think, theoretically, fourth.
May the fourth be with you.
So make sure every single time you are doing a TH, your tongue is between your teeth. It feels a little funny, but that's just how to correctly pronounce it. Closes. How can we pronounce this word? Let me give you a quick hack. So, technically, it is pronounced clothes with that little voiced TH. But you basically can't hear it, so if this is difficult, try this instead. Just say the word close, like how you close a door. So listen to this and see if you can notice a difference. Wow, I love your clothes today. Versus, oh my God, I love your clothes today. Can you hear a difference? So if the TH is a little bit difficult, just skip it and say close instead.
Months. This word can be a bitch to try and pronounce correctly because there's a TH and an S together. But what if there was a hack to help you easily pronounce it just like a native English speaker? Similar to the pronunciation hack for close, just skip the TH. So instead of getting your tongue all tangled up trying to pronounce that TH and S together, months, just say months. Cutting out that TH in months makes it so much easier to pronounce, and it'll help you sound more fluent and confident when speaking English.
Happy Thanksgiving! In honor of Turkey Day, let's practice the TH sound. For TH, you must put your tongue between your teeth. So let's try this sentence. Thanksgiving falls on the fourth Thursday of every November. Give this a try, keep practicing, and follow for more tips on how to sound like a native English speaker. In today's perfect pronunciation practice, we're talking K-pop. Well, K-pop high schools, that is. Some of the key points in today's pronunciation practice will be the perfect P pronunciation, South versus Southern, because they look the same, but they sound quite different. And we'll even touch on how to differentiate the different ED endings. So for this practice, I will first read a paragraph out loud, then we'll carefully go back through it to check out all of those key pronunciation and fluency points. And after that, we will read it out loud together so that you can get in your speaking and pronunciation practice. Let's get started. Whiting! So the title of our article is K-pop high schools open in Busan and Singapore. Let's begin. K-pop, short for Korean pop, is one of the world's most popular genres of music, and groups like BTS and Blackpink have huge numbers of fans all over the globe. So let's look at a few pronunciation points. First of all, notice how I pronounced pop. Pop. In general, with the P sound, it's pop, pop. But when P is at the end of the word, you can actually cut that P sound. There's no need to do the air after it. It might sound a little unnatural. So your mouth will still go into that P shape, but you just don't push out the air at the end. So instead of pop, it's pop, pop. We're still stopping that air, but we're not going to push it out. So K-pop, Korean pop. Another word that I would like to highlight is genres. Genres. So a lot of people see the G and they think it's gone or genres or genres, but this G has a very different pronunciation from most other G sounds in the English language. So it's not J, and it's definitely not G. I like to think of it as almost a like Z plus J sound. So if you think about the Z sound, it has a long Z, like buzzing inside your mouth, right? And it's longer, Z. But J is short, J, J, J. So you're still going to have a similar shape inside of your mouth with that J, J, but it'll be longer and a little more buzzy, like the Z, J, J. Does that make sense? And then that RES is actually making a ruz sound. So it's not genres, it's genres, genres. This word actually comes from French, and a lot of words that come from French into English have some unique ways of spelling. So let's look at a fluency point, specifically with this phrase, numbers of fans all over the globe. You'll notice that I am blending a lot of those words together. And that's because a lot of the words start or end with a vowel sound. So let's look at the first one. Of. Of starts with a vowel sound. So we will blend it with the word before. Numbers of. All also starts with that vowel sound, so we can blend it. Fans all. Fans all. Over also starts with that vowel sound. All over. All over. They sound like one word. And then here with the, it ends with that vowel sound, so we can connect it to the next word. The globe. The globe. And we can also make that E a lot shorter in the. It doesn't have to say the globe. It can be the globe. The globe. So now this phrase sounds like numbers of fans all over the globe. It's almost like one word. I often joke with my students that to sound as fluent and natural as possible in English, you should be a little bit breathless at the end of a sentence because all of the words kind of blend into one. So now let's go through this paragraph one more time, and I want you to read it with me. K-pop, short for Korean pop, is one of the world's most popular genres of music, and groups like BTS and Blackpink have huge numbers of fans all over the globe. Excellent! Let's move on to the next paragraph. But becoming a K-pop superstar isn't something that just happens overnight. Many K-pop artists have to go through years of intensive training before they can release any music. So in that previous paragraph, we talked about that last P in K-pop, how it's not pop. But because we have that vowel sound after it with artists, when we blend this together, it sounds like K-pop artists. So that P kind of goes over to the A, and it sounds like partists in a way. So K-pop artists. So you're getting more of that P sound. We also have more of that blending with becoming a, superstar isn't, happens overnight. We're blending that as well. And just be careful with that pronunciation of through, because it's often confused with thought and though. So you have through, thought, though. They all look basically the same, but they do have very different vowel sounds because sometimes English is the worst. I also want to point out the connection between through and years. So we've been talking about how these vowel sounds will connect to the next word. And you can see here we have G and H. Those are not vowels, but it's a vowel sound. Ooh, through. So because it makes that ooh vowel sound, ooh, it will blend. So this will sound like through years. So let's read it out loud together. But becoming a K-pop superstar isn't something that just happens overnight. Many K-pop artists have to go through years of intensive training before they can release any music. How was that? Let's move on to our next paragraph. In South Korea, there are a number of after-school academies for training the K-pop stars of the future. And there are even high schools specializing in K-pop training. I used to teach at an after-school academy in South Korea, but it was for English, not K-pop, obviously. Let's look at that pronunciation of South. South. Now, this can be tricky for a lot of students because there is the S and the TH sound. Many people will do the same sound, but they are clearly different. So for the S sound, your tongue is behind your teeth and your teeth are together. S, s. You can see my teeth are touching and you cannot see my tongue at all. That's a key point. But with that TH, you can clearly see that my tongue is between my teeth. I'm not biting my tongue. That would hurt. But my tongue is between my teeth. They are touching it. So you gotta make sure that when you have these words that have an S and a TH, they can be tricky. First, your tongue will be in your mouth, and then you gotta get it out. South. South. Also, with the OU, you'll notice that this makes the ow sound, kind of like cow or bow, or if someone hits your arm, ow. Okay, so ow. Let's also look at the word academies. Academies. You'll notice that I'm emphasizing that second syllable. Academies. It is not academies. However, with the word academics, you will emphasize this third syllable, academics. So we have academies and academics. They're very similar words, but they do have different stresses. And of course, we still need to keep in mind those vowel sounds at the beginning and ends of words. So if we look down here with this phrase, and there are even high schools specializing in K-pop training. We have vowels here, but it's not there. It's not a vowel sound. This is a consonant sound. But right here with the A, that's the vowel sound. So it'll still blend. There are, and then are even. There are even. And that's a lot of R's. I understand that. It feels weird even for me to say it. So you just have to slow down a little bit and make sure you're emphasizing those R's correctly and blending with the vowel sounds. So let's read this together. In South Korea, there are a number of after-school academies for training the K-pop stars of the future. And there are even high schools specializing in K-pop training. Let's move on to the next paragraph. The first high school dedicated to K-pop, the High School of Korean Pop and Performing Arts, opened in South Chungcheong Province in 2020. So we have a few things to look at in here. First of all, if you noticed, my tone changed with this phrase, the High School of Korean Pop and Performing Arts. Do you know why? That's because we have these commas right here, which show that it's a little extra sprinkle of information. When we have these extra bits of information, we'll change the tone of our voice, usually make it a little bit lower. Now, if you're reading this to yourself, it doesn't matter. But if you are giving a presentation, like a speech or something for your school or work, this is something that you need to do just to let the listeners know that this is extra information. Also, a little fun thing that some people forget is right here. Hi. Hi. That GH is silent. And this will sound the same as hi. Hello. I don't know why there's the GH. The next thing that I want to point out is the year. Now, I said 2020, but it's also perfectly okay to say 2020. It's really your choice. The only time it matters is if it's the years 2000 to 2009. You must say 2000. But after that, it's whatever you want. So you can say 2010, 2010, 2020, 2020. Who cares? You just choose your favorite. I know I will mix it up within the same conversation. It doesn't matter. Now, this next point that I will discuss is very specific for Korean language when it's translated to English. So if this is not something that you care about, you can skip to this timestamp. But for people that are interested in Korea, maybe you love K-pop, maybe you want to visit Korea or go work there. This is something that you should pay attention to. So you'll notice with the pronunciation of Chungcheong that these are two different sounds. It's not Chungcheong or Chungcheong. For some reason, when the Korean alphabet was first translated into the Romanized or English alphabet, they decided that the O sound should be written as EO, and I will never understand that. Another case where we can see this is the BTS member Jungkook. So a lot of people don't know that his name, if it's spelled correctly, is actually Jeong and then Kook. That's because people outside of Korea don't know that EO makes the aw sound because it doesn't make sense. So in the case of Jungkook, he actually spells it Jungkook, which is not the most accurate pronunciation of his name, but it's the best and closest alternative because if he kept it spelled Jungkook, then everyone would call him Jeongkook. And that's not close at all. So he just changed the spelling to Jungkook because it's closer to Jungkook and it's easier for other people to understand that pronunciation. So just remember, if for some reason you're looking up Korean places, that EO makes the aw sound, which doesn't have a very good English equivalent sound. So now let's read the paragraph together. The first high school dedicated to K-pop, the High School of Korean Pop and Performing Arts, opened in South Chungcheong Province in 2020. Next paragraph. And soon, future K-pop stars living in Busan, South Korea's second biggest city, will have a school of their own too. So there isn't too much to discuss in this paragraph, but you will notice that when I pronounced second, I didn't give very much emphasis to that D, and it almost sounded like an IN. It wasn't second or second, it's second. So in context, that D will also be dropped a little bit. Dropping the D at the end of an ND word is something that a lot of native English speakers do. So you might notice sometimes with the word and that people will drop that D. So like the popular dish macaroni and cheese. It's and cheese, but no one says the D part, just macaroni and cheese or mac and cheese. So when you drop the D at the end of those ND words, it'll help you sound a little bit more like a native English speaker, if that's your goal. We also have that phrase that's the extra sprinkle of information right here with South Korea's second biggest city. So remember, our intonation will go down when we read that. So let's read this together. And soon, future K-pop stars living in Busan, South Korea's second biggest city, will have a school of their own too. Awesome job. Let's keep moving. The Education Department of Busan, located on Korea's southern coast, has announced that it will be opening a new K-pop high school there in March 2028. This article seems like it's written a little too early. That's in 4 years. Why are we discussing this now? So we have quite a few things to discuss in this paragraph. We will talk about the pronunciation of education. We'll talk about department, this ED in located and announced because they are pronounced differently. And we will discuss southern. Let's first talk about the word education. Now, because we have this D plus a U sound, D plus U sound, not the letters, this will make a kind of Ju sound, edu. So the word is going to sound like ju k shun. education, education. It's not edu or education, education, education. Now let's look at the word department, department. You might have noticed that I kind of cut off the T sound, but I still stopped my air. I like to think of this as a karate chop T. So I'm shaping my mouth into the T. I'm pushing the air out, but it will stop. So instead of department, department, department. Now, a lot of native English speakers will do this karate chop for T's in the middle and at the ends of words. But the key thing to remember is you cannot do it if there's a vowel sound afterwards. So in department, there's an M. It's a consonant sound afterwards. And if department was at the end of a sentence and it stopped there, you could do that karate chop, department, and also kind of cut that T at the end. But we do have this vowel sound afterwards with of. So it will sound like department of. So the T will blend over. Now let's talk about these two different ED sounds. So we have located and we have announced. So the reason that we do pronounce the id with located is because of this T. The only time that you can do an id sound is if you have a T or a D. That's it. That will give you the id sound. If you do not have that T or D at the end of the verb, then your ED will sound like a T or a D. So here, announced, announced. So why am I doing a T sound? That's because this is voiceless. When it's voiceless, we'll do a T. So announced, announced. But if it's voiced, we will do that D sound. So for instance, one of the words from our vocab challenge today is compose. And this word is a verb with a voiced ending. Z, compose. So if we add that ed onto the end, it's not composed, it's not composed, it's composed. Composed. Make sense? I'll link below my favorite ed pronunciation chart. I've seriously used it for the past 10 years of teaching, and everyone loves it. So check it out below for some more detailed information on that ed pronunciation. Now I want to look at the word southern. Southern. It sounds like southern. And this is voiced. If you remember, south has that ow sound, like ow, and the th is voiceless. But once we add on that ern, it does become southern, southern. So we have south and southern. They're related, but they sound very different. So now let's read this paragraph together. The Education Department of Busan, located in Korea's southern coast, has announced that it will be opening a new K-pop high school there in March 2028. How were those EDs for you? And did you try that karate chop T sound? Let's continue. The new school will focus on K-pop and performance arts, offering students classes in singing, dancing, composing, and writing songs. The classes will be taught by those with experience in the K-pop industry. Let's first look at the pronunciation of focus. Focus. Now you have to get that long O sound. Faux. Faux. And then the CUS actually kind of sounds like kiss. So the word sounds like faux kiss. Focus. Check out this video right here for more detailed information on how to pronounce focus, and you can hear how it's often mispronounced into a really bad word. Yes. Moving along, right here, you'll notice it is classes. Classes. When you have this ES plural at the end of a word, ending with S, it will always make this sis sound. Classes. Did you notice how I pronounced writing? So instead of doing a clear T, writing, I pronounced it with a sort of D sound. Writing, writing. This is a very common thing that at least American English speakers do. We relax a lot of the T's so that they sound like D's. Writing. And the last thing I want to point out is right here. Experience. We have two vowel sounds, E and in. Ience. Experience. Now with these words that have two vowel sounds right next to each other, it would be really awkward if we pronounce this experience, e-ints, and kind of cut them. So we want to add a transitional sound to blend them together. Our two transitional sounds are the Y and the W. In this case, we're using the Y, but for words that have an O or U sound, we would use a W. We'll discuss that later in this article. And the last thing that I want to point out is a very common mistake with my students, and that's where to give emphasis in the word industry. You want to emphasize that first syllable, industry. It's not industry, industry. So let's read this together. The new school will focus on K-pop and performance arts, offering students classes in singing, dancing, composing, and writing songs. The classes will be taught by those with experience in the K-pop industry. How'd you do? Let's read these next two paragraphs together because they're only one sentence each. The K-pop school will accept students from all over the country, as well as international students. But students from Southeast Asia might not have to travel to South Korea to learn how to be a K-pop artist. Let's look at a few words in here. First, accept. Accept. We have two of the same letter, but both of those letters have different sounds. So it'll sound like ac and then sept. Accept. And here we have that same OU that was in south, but you can hear that it actually has an sound. Country. Country. It's not ow like south. In the second paragraph, I want to point out the 3 EA pronunciations because they're all different. EA is very tricky because it has so many different pronunciations and seemingly no rules for how to pronounce it and when and with which words. It's just something that you have to memorize. So the first one is southeast. We have that E sound, southeast. The second one is Korea, Iya. You can also hear that Y transition sound, Iya. And then the third one is learn, like an ER sound. So here we have all these different kinds. We have the ya, and ER. Yeah. EA kind of sucks. So let's read these two sentences together. The K-pop school will accept students from all over the country, as well as international students. But students from Southeast Asia might not have to travel to South Korea to learn how to be a K-pop artist. Next paragraph. The prestigious School of Performing Arts Seoul, also known as SOPA, is collaborating with Singapore Raffles Music College to open the first international K-pop school in Singapore. That's pretty cool. So with the word prestigious, it is also sometimes pronounced prestigious instead of prestige. Some people prefer prestigious. So you choose your favorite. It doesn't matter. With this acronym right here, SOPA, acronyms are sometimes said with the individual letters SOAPA. You'll notice this with like CEO, but often with names, they are blended together to make a new word almost. So instead of SOPA, this is pronounced SOPA, almost like it's a name. Another key word to check the pronunciation on is college. College is very frequently mispronounced as colleague, which is a completely different word. So for college, it sounds like call, almost like call on a phone, and then lidge, college. And one more thing, let's look at this L right here in raffles. A lot of people have been taught that this L at the end of a word should have an O shape. So raffles. We can also see this with words like table or people. I have heard so many students pronounce these as tabo and peepo, and that's just not correct. So to get the accurate L sound, what I recommend is pulling your mouth out. Table, people, raffle. You might need to look in a mirror to do this, or, get your phone and just watch yourself. Table, people. And if you're still having difficulty, literally just hold your mouth out. I do that practice all the time with my students. We sit there holding our mouths to say table, raffle, people, just so you can practice that accuracy, because it's not O. It's not raffo, tabo, peepo. It's ul. Keep it horizontal, not round. So now let's read this all together. The prestigious School of Performing Arts in Seoul, also known as SOPA, is collaborating with Singapore Raffles Music College to open the first international K-pop school in Singapore. Only 2 paragraphs left. We're almost there. While it's not a dedicated K-pop training school, some of K-pop's most famous stars are graduates of SOPA, including Jungkook from BTS. Hey, we talked about him earlier. So we already discussed that id sound. Because we have the T, it will make the tid sound. Dedicated. We also talked about the OU pronunciation in South and Southern. So here, this OU pronunciation is similar to Southern. So this word will be pronounced with the long A, fe, and then mus. Famous, famous. It's not famous, famous. Now let's look at the word graduates. There are 3 key points that we need to discuss. I'll write it larger down here so that it will be easier to take a look at. So we already previously discussed how D plus U makes a Jew sound. So this will sound like gra-Jew. Grad-Jew. But what about this A-T-E-S? Usually when A is paired with that magic E, it makes a long A sound. So you might look at this and think graduates. But there are plenty of words that have the same spelling in their verb and noun or adjective forms. The only way to differentiate them is the pronunciation. So for words that have this A-T-E sound at the end, the verbs will have the long A, but the nouns or adjectives will have an IT sound. It. So this is not graduates because that would be a verb. This is graduates. It's. And finally, I had mentioned before that we would talk about that W transition. So we need some kind of transition between these 2 vowel sounds. Because we have this O or U sound, we will not use Y. Instead, we are going to use a W. Graduates. Graduates. So the O or U sound, when it transitions to another vowel, has the W. Wits. Does that make sense? Let's read this all together. While it's not a dedicated K-pop training school, some of K-pop's most famous stars are graduates of SOPA, including Jungkook from BTS. And finally, we're on our last sentence. The Singapore school plans to open its doors to its first 75 students in the second half of 2024. So the only thing here that I really want to point out is that pronunciation of 70 in 75. It can be really easy to get these tens and teens mixed up, so how can you tell the difference between 17 and 70? Well, if you listen carefully, you'll notice that I changed the stress and the clearness of the T. So for 17, it's like this, 17, with a very clear T, 17. But for 70, we'll emphasize the first part, 7, and then we'll do a soft D, 17. D. So we have 17 and then 7D. I highly recommend checking out this video for a more detailed explanation. And again, for that year at the end, you choose. Do you want to say 2024 or 2024? It doesn't matter. So let's finish this up and read our last paragraph together. The Singapore school plans to open its doors to its first 75 students in the second half of 2024. Now let's read the entire thing all together. K-pop, short for Korean pop, is one of the world's most popular genres of music, and groups like BTS and Blackpink have huge numbers of fans all over the globe. But becoming a K-pop superstar isn't something that just happens overnight. Many K-pop artists have to go through years of intensive training before they can release any music. In South Korea, there are a number of after-school academies for training the K-pop stars of the future. And there are even high schools specializing in K-pop training. The first high school dedicated to K-pop, the High School of Korean Pop and Performing Arts, opened in South Chungcheong Province in 2020. And soon, future K-pop stars living in Busan, South Korea's second biggest city, will have a school of their own too. The Education Department of Busan, located in Korea's southern coast, has announced that it will be opening a new K-pop high school there in March 2028. The new school will focus on K-pop and performance arts, offering students classes in singing, dancing, composing, and writing songs. The classes will be taught by those with experience in the K-pop industry. The K-pop school will accept students from all over the country, as well as international students. But students from Southeast Asia might not have to travel to South Korea to learn how to be a K-pop artist. The prestigious School of Performing Arts in Seoul, also known as SOPA, is collaborating with Singapore Raffles Music College to open the first international K-pop school in Singapore. While it's not a dedicated K-pop training school, some of K-pop's most famous stars are graduates of SOPA, including Jungkook from BTS. The Singapore school plans to open its doors to its first 75 students in the second half of 2024. So today let's talk about the L pronunciation, specifically L at the end of a word, such as in table or pile. I often hear people do sort of an O sound, like tabo or pio. You want to make sure that the shape of your mouth is the same as the letter before the L. So for instance, table, bowl, or in pile, 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 table. Remember, your mouth does not make the O shape unless that's the sound before the L. Sound good? Follow for more tips. It's the biggest shopping day of the year, Black Friday. So let's practice how to pronounce our favorite day of the year. For the B in black, you want to make sure your lips come together. B, b. And with the L, your tongue will come behind your teeth. Ol, black. With the F in Friday, you kind of bite your bottom lip and make a voiceless sound. And with the R, your tongue will come into the back of your mouth and your lips will make a circle. Friday. So let's put this in a sentence. Black Friday is the best time to go shopping.
Did you know that these 3 words have different stresses? And if you do the stress on the wrong syllable, you'll actually be mispronouncing it. Let's look at the first word, analyze. We'll stress the first syllable, analyze. Now looking at our next word, analysis. We stress the second syllable on this word, analysis. Analysis. And for our third word, analytics, you'll notice that we stress the third syllable. Analytics. Analytics. Analyze. Analysis. Analytics.
Let's talk about how to pronounce this word. First, we'll break it down. With this word, it is sign. The S is voiceless, and the G is silent. Now, let's look at the next part, resign. The S is now voiced like a Z, and the G is still silent. Now, let's talk about how to pronounce the full word, and it is, drumroll please, resignation. That's right. The G is voiced. So with the S, it makes the voiced Z sound, and the G is now voiced. Resignation. Resignation. Isn't English fun?
The title of today's article is 91% of Americans have lost sleep to binge watching. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely part of the 91%. Let's get started. 91% of Americans have lost sleep to binge watching. It's late. You should really go to sleep. But the show you're watching is so good. You can watch another episode and still be okay for school or work tomorrow, right? Let's discuss a few notable pronunciation and fluency points. So the first thing that I want to point out that you always need to keep in mind with your fluency as you're speaking is that you need to blend your vowel sounds between words. Here's what I mean. In the second sentence, we have, you should really go to sleep. You'll notice that I blend together really and go because really has that vowel sound. You should really go, and then go has that vowel sound at the end, so we'll blend that as well. Go to. Go to. And then to also has a vowel sound, so we'll blend that together. To sleep. To sleep. You should really go to sleep. You'll notice that I'm not making it choppy. Go to sleep. It all blends together. You need to do this 99% of the time with those vowel sounds. The next thing that you might have noticed was right here with the and show. Oftentimes, we don't really say the to its fullest extent. It'll kind of sound like the show, the show. So we are blending it together, but that E is very, very short. The show. The next thing to note is this contraction, your. A lot of my students want to read this as you are, or they make it like 2 syllables. Your. But you don't want to do that. Your is pronounced the same way as your. You're watching. It's not you were, because that actually is you were in that past tense. It needs to just be 1 syllable. Your. Another thing that people sometimes get confused by is what they should do when they come across this hyphen in their reading. Really, you should treat it like a comma, so you will do a little pause before it, just like if there was a comma. And then the final thing that I want to note is the question mark right at the end. If you're asking a question, your voice intonation has to go up, or else you're just saying statements, and that wouldn't really make sense in this context. So let's read this paragraph out loud together. It's late. You should really go to sleep. But the show you're watching is so good. You can watch another episode and still be okay for school or work tomorrow, right? So I know I said that we would read 1 paragraph at a time, but these 2 paragraphs are only 1 sentence each. So let's just read them together. If you've ever done this, you're not alone. In fact, it would be more surprising if you said you haven't done this. So right here with you've, it's that same thing as what we discussed with your. You won't say you have. It needs to be 1 syllable, like you've. And then we have that your again. It'll be like this, your. And for the vowel connection in this paragraph, I would like to point out this one with alone. In the previous paragraph, we discussed how to connect when the last sound of a word is a vowel sound. But we can also do this when the first sound is a vowel sound. So right here, not alone. We'll connect them. And you'll also notice that instead of saying not alone, I'm kind of relaxing that T sound, so it almost sounds a little bit more like a D. Not alone. Let's look at the next sentence. You might have noticed that when I said it, I didn't do the full it. It would be. I did what I like to call a karate chop. It. So my tongue is going into the T shape, but I'm not pushing out the air after putting it into that shape. So instead of it, I'm saying it, and I'm stopping the air. So it would be. I'm kind of doing that with the D in would be, but I'm not doing it as severely as with a T. In general, I would not recommend doing that karate chop with D's at the end of a word. But with T, you can usually do the karate chop. Unless there's a vowel after the T, then you won't do a karate chop. And like we've discussed before, we're going to be blending that vowel. Be more. But we will not blend more and surprising. Do you know why? It's because this is not a vowel sound at the end of more. Yes, E is a vowel, but it does not have any sound to it. This is the magic E, so it is silent. That's why you'll notice I keep saying vowel sounds, because sometimes a vowel is silent and sometimes a consonant is silent. English is weird, man. I don't make the rules. And at the end of the sentence, we do have another contraction with haven't. So that E is silent. It's not haven't. So the V and N are voiced. And then that T at the end. The T is not voiced. Now you want to be careful between the V and the N to not do an extra vocalization. I don't want to hear haven't, which is something that a lot of students want to do after a V. It's very easy when you're transitioning from a V to another sound to open your mouth a little bit while you're still making a sound. If you do that, then it sounds like haven't. And we don't want that extra sound. Just haven't. It needs to be a very fast transition between the V and the N. Bnt. And then the T at the end. And finally, at the end of the sentence, we have an exclamation point. Woohoo! So remember, exclamation points show emphasis, whether it's excitement or anger or surprise, anything. So we want to give it a little more strength, a little more oomph, probably just by making it a bit louder. So let's read these two sentences together. If you've ever done this, you're not alone. In fact, it would be more surprising if you said you haven't done this. Let's continue. A 2023 survey for the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, AASM, found that nearly all Americans, 91% of them, say they have lost sleep by staying up later than they intended while binge watching videos and TV shows. I know I've done that quite a few times. What about you? Let's first quickly discuss the year. You'll notice that I said 2023, but you don't have to say 2023. If you wanted, you could say 2023. It really does not matter. But it does matter when we're talking about the years 2000 through 2009. For these years, you have to say 2000, 2001, 2002, all the way to 2009. But after that, it's whatever you want. 2011 or 2011. Doesn't matter. Follow your heart. Now let's discuss a few stress and emphasis mistakes that I frequently hear from English learners. The first one is survey. Survey. A lot of people want to say survey, and that simply isn't correct. It needs to be survey. Survey. Another word is academy. Academy, not academy. I can understand the confusion though, because the word academic does have that emphasis on that third syllable. So you have academic, but then academy. it can get a little tricky sometimes. I also want to point out where the emphasis needs to be in percent. A lot of people will say percent, but it's actually percent. You want to give that second syllable a lot of emphasis. Percent. Percent. And two little vocabulary notes that I would like to make that have nothing to do with pronunciation. We can see this phrasal verb staying up. So with staying up, this means to stay awake late at night. So usually people would say, I stayed up late last night, or I stayed up until 1 a.m. last night, whatever. So this is a really good phrasal verb to use, especially if you're a night owl or if maybe you have a bad habit of working on projects late at night. The other vocabulary word that I would like to point out is shows. I discussed this in a recent video, but Americans don't actually use the word series to discuss series that they're watching on Netflix or whatever streaming platform. We just use the blanket term shows. So that could mean reality shows, a series, whatever. So if you're talking to a native English speaker and asking them about what they've been watching recently on Netflix or HBO, whatever streaming platform they use, if you use the term series, they might get a little bit confused because it's just a word that we rarely use. So let's read this paragraph together, really focusing on stress and emphasis. A 2023 survey for the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, AASM, found that nearly all Americans, 91% of them, say they have lost sleep by staying up later than they intended while binge watching videos and TV shows. Excellent. Let's join together this next standalone sentence with the following paragraph. And men are 30% more likely than women to say they do this often. Staying up late binge watching is most common among young people. About half of those aged 18 to 34 say they do it often, compared to just 14% of those aged 55 and above. So one key thing that you might have noticed with my pronunciation was that I pronounced often two different ways. In this often, I did not say the T, and in this one right here, I did say the T. Do you know why I did this? It's because you can pronounce often or often either way. It really does not matter. In the United States, there are some people who will only pronounce it often, and other people that only pronounce it often, and a pretty significant group of people that mix it up and do both. I know I do both because it doesn't matter. Just choose whichever one you prefer or use both. But now let's look at the pronunciation of women. Even though I have discussed this many times and I've made different Instagram reels about it, I still hear people mispronouncing this quite frequently. I know that there's an O and an E in women, but if you listen to how it's actually pronounced, it sounds like women, like there are two short I sounds in it. So it's not women, it's women. English is weird. Now in the paragraph, you'll notice right here, half. This L is silent, half. It's similar to the word walk, W-A-L-K, or talk, T-A-L-K, the L is silent in those words. Walk, talk, half, calf. I can't think of other words off the top of my head, but there are quite a few words where the L is silent. Again, English is weird. Now I want to look at two of these ED words because ED at the end of a word is very commonly mispronounced. So right here we have aged and compared. You'll notice I am not saying aged or compared. It's aged, compared. The only time that you will pronounce the id is if the base word ends in a T or a D. For example, the word wanted ends in a T. So, because of that, you'll do the id sound, wanted. Or if you have a word like needed, the base verb ends with a D. So you'll do the id, wanted, needed. But with aged and compared, they do not have that T or D. So you should not say compared because that's simply incorrect. The last thing that I would like to point out in this paragraph, you might have noticed with two, I did not say the full two. I did more of a t, 18 to 32. I did this for two reasons. One, it helps with fluency and it just flows a lot better. 18 to 32. The second reason that I did this was to make sure it was clear that I was not saying the number 2. If you say 18 to 34, it sounds like you're maybe giving a code for something. The passcode is 18 to 34. So instead of saying 2, just go with t, 18 to 34. So let's read this sentence and paragraph together. And men are 30% more likely than women to say they do this often or often. Staying up late binge watching is most common among young people. About half of those aged 18 to 34 say they do it often, compared to just 14% of those aged 55 and above. Let's move on to the next paragraph. It can be tempting to watch one more episode or scroll through one more viral video, says Alexander Abreu. I don't exactly know how to pronounce their name. A spokesperson for the AASM. But anything that keeps us from getting the recommended 7 hours of sleep each night can be harmful to overall health. I discuss this all the time in my videos that scrolling on Instagram or TikTok at nighttime when you should be going to sleep, or ideally reading a book, is not a great use of your time. And I have read in a lot of research papers that it's not great for your brain waves at nighttime either. Let's discuss a few pronunciation points. This word right here, through, can be a little bit tricky because of that O-U-G-H. O-U-G-H has a few different sounds. You have though, through, tough, thought. It can be quite tricky. And honestly, the only way to figure out which pronunciation is correct is just practice practice and memorization. So in this case, it is through. Just ooh, ooh, ooh. Another little thing to note right here, spokes, spokes. It's not spokes, spokes. So that K, the S, and also the P are all voiceless. So you have spo and then the K, k, s, p, spokesperson, spokesperson. So that's a lot of voiceless sounds all in a row. Like we discussed in our last paragraph, right here, we do have that D at the end of the verb. So it will be pronounced did. Recommended. Earlier in this practice, I had mentioned the concept of vowel sounds and how sometimes at the end of a word, there's a vowel like the magic E that does not have a sound. Here is another one of those weird situations with the word hours. Hours. It has an H, but the H is silent. Therefore, hours has a vowel sound and it will blend with the previous word. 7 hours. 7 hours. But just remember that these other H's in harmful and health, those are not vowel sounds. You will say those H's. But here it does have that vowel before it, so be harmful. It will blend, but in a slightly different way. So let's read this paragraph together. It can be tempting to watch one more episode or scroll through one more viral video, said Alexandra Bro, a spokesperson for the AASM, but anything that keeps us from getting the recommended 7 hours of sleep each night can be harmful to our overall health. We're getting close to the ending. Let's read these two sentences together. The survey of 2005 U.S. adults was done in March 2023. It also found that 3/4 of Americans have stayed up past their bedtime to shop online. Uh-oh, online shopping. I've been guilty of this before too. What about you? Let's talk about that pronunciation of thousand, because this can be pretty tricky. In the beginning, for that TH sound, you gotta get your tongue between your teeth. I know it feels weird and it's not a common sound, or it might not even occur in many other languages. But in English, every single time you see the TH, your tongue has to go between your teeth. It is not a Z sound. If your tongue is behind your teeth, zzz, zzz, then it sounds like Z. We don't want that for our first sound. However, the S is going to have that Z sound. Thousand, zind. So you gotta make sure that for that first part, your tongue is out, thou, and your mouth is also going to go through a bit of a transitional shape. Ow, ow. And then you gotta pull your tongue back, clamp your teeth together to make that Z sound. Zind, zind, thou, zind. In fact, for that whole second syllable of that S-A-N-D, you can just have your jaw completely shut. Zind. Thou, your jaw will move. Thou, zind, zind. By doing this, you'll ensure that you're not accidentally doing thousand, or even worse, thousand. So remember, step 1, tongue between your teeth. Step 2, tongue behind your closed teeth. Z, z, thousand. The next thing I'd like to point out is quarters. Quarters. You don't need to do quarters. Quarters. That sounds pretty awkward. Instead, you can just do like a KOR sound. Core. And then the T can be relaxed more to make a D sound. So in the end, it will sound like quarters. Quarters. My lips aren't really moving. It's not quar, it's quarters. Quarters. If you need some help practicing this kind of technique of keeping your mouth a little bit more tight, I do recommend, and I do this with my students a lot, just putting your fingers there. Put your fingers there and or look in a mirror. Quarters. Quarters. Having this kind of physical and visual cue is very, very helpful because so much of pronunciation is just movement based. So if you can really nail down your mouth movements, that is going to be a key factor in perfecting your pronunciation. Moving along, we also have another ED right here. And hopefully you noticed it wasn't stayed, it's just stayed. Stayed. There's no extra vowel sound for I, just one syllable. Stayed. The last thing I want to point out is right here with up and past. Because these two words end and start with the same sound, we can actually join those sounds together. And instead of saying up, past, you could instead say up past, up past. So it almost becomes one word. Let's read this all together. The survey of 2005 U.S. adults was done in March 2023. It also found that 3/4 of Americans have stayed up past their bedtime to shop online. Let's continue. When they have trouble sleeping, about half of Americans say they watch TV, and almost as many use their smartphone. 28% say they read, and the same number take a bath or a shower. I definitely love to read when I can't fall asleep, but I have been guilty of using my smartphone quite a few times when I'm having trouble catching a few Z's. In this paragraph, I would really like to highlight the BLE. A lot of people will pronounce this BLE, or this also goes for PLE, as bow, and do an O sound. But there's no O in it. It's an L, and then a magic E. So what you should do is, again, get those hands ready. Keep your mouth out. Trouble. Bull. You will not be doing trouble. Do you see the difference in how my mouth moves? If it's correct, my mouth goes out. Trouble. Oh. It's incorrect to do trouble. So as you're practicing this, get those fingers, put them out at the corner of your mouth. Also, watch yourself in a mirror or your phone as you're doing this. Trouble. Bull. It's not bow. And this same rule goes for all the words that end in BLE, such as table, and also PLE words like people. Table, people. pull it out. Moving along, don't forget that the L in half is also silent. You might have noticed when I pronounced 20, I did not say 20 with that clear T sound. I almost cut out that T and I emphasized the first syllable, 20. This is something that you need to keep in mind with numbers like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90. I already made a video about it, which I'll link up in the card, but by emphasizing that first syllable and relaxing the T in the second syllable, it will help clear up any confusion between your tens and teens. So after this video, give that one a watch. And a little note about this term, watch TV. Americans use this term very broadly. So not only does it mean watching something on their television, whether it's the news or a sitcom or TV drama, whatever, this also includes watching a series, which again, we actually call shows, on a streaming platform on any device. So if you're watching Friends on your laptop, that's still considered watching TV. If you're watching Netflix on your phone, we would still consider that watching TV. So you don't really get to say, I don't watch TV, if you're still streaming stuff on your phone, tablet, or laptop. It's still watching TV. So let's read this together. When they have trouble sleeping, about half of Americans say they watch TV, and almost as many use their smartphone. 28% say they read, and the same number take a bath or a shower. And let's read these last two paragraphs together to wrap this up. To sleep well, the AASM recommends that you have a relaxing nighttime routine and try to go to bed and wake up at the same time each day. It also recommends turning off electronic devices at least 30 minutes before bedtime and leaving your phone in another room. Who does that? Who keeps their phone in another room? If you do this, let us know in the comments section. I can't imagine leaving my phone in a different room. This thing is with me all the time, and my alarm is on it. Why would I put it in another room? So let's review these final pronunciation points. You might have noticed in the beginning, I did that T sound again to blend to and sleep, to sleep well. However, with the, I actually did more of a the sound. Do you know why? There are kind of two reasons why. The first reason is the next word starts with a vowel sound. The AASM. The AASM. But the second reason that we would use the instead of the is when we're talking about something unique or special, or it has a special title. When you say the, it gives that bit of extra emphasis that something is unique or special. So you probably wouldn't say, I take the bus to go to work in the morning. But if there is some special bus in your city that everybody knows about and it's cool and unique,
welcome to the night bus. Emergency transport for the stranded witch or wizard.
like we discussed in that previous paragraph with up and past becoming up past, we can do that same thing here with nighttime. So instead of night time, we'll just make it one sound. Nighttime. Nighttime. Now let's discuss this OU in routine. A lot of people want to say row or ruh or something. But in this scenario, it is just ooh, routine. Another thing to note right here with devices. Now, when we have ES at the end of the word, we'll actually rarely say is. Just like how we rarely say id with ed at the end of a word. But here we will say sis at the end because of that C or S sound with device. So if you have a word that has that S at the end of it, and then you add the plural S, or if it's a verb, you're conjugating it and it needs the S, then you will say sis, and you'll have that extra vocal vowel sound, sis. Hopefully you also noticed that with the number 30, I did not pronounce it 30 because that would actually sound like 13, 13. I pronounced it 30, 30. If it was 13, I would pronounce it 13, 13. But because it's one of the tens, 30, I will emphasize that first syllable and then soften that T sound so that it sounds more like a D. So we have 30 versus 13 with that clear T. Another weird thing in English is the word minutes. Even though it's that UTE, it actually just sounds like minutes. Like with an I sound, minutes. If you do the U sound, then the word becomes minute, minute, which is an adjective to describe something very, very small. So the spelling is the same between minute and minute, but the meanings and pronunciations are completely different. So just like how women has different letters, but it sounds like I, the same thing goes here with minutes. It has a U in magic E, but it just has that short I sound. Now in nighttime, I had discussed how we'll combine the T sounds to just make one, nighttime, and we'll do the same thing here in bedtime. Bedtime. Now that's not because D and T have the exact same sound, it's because they have the same shape. Try this out. Make a T sound. T, t, t. Now make a D sound. D, d, d. It's the same shape, right? At least it should be. The only difference is the D is voiced, so you can actually feel it between the T, 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 t and the D, 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 d. You can feel the vibration in your voice box for those voiced sounds. But because the shape is the same, you will combine it. Bedtime, bedtime. So as you're going into it, it is voiced, bed, and then you'll make it voiceless as you push out the air for the T. Bedtime, bedtime. It is not bedtime, bedtime. And finally, we have that exclamation point at the end to show emphasis. Leave your phone in another room. Weird. But whatever. That's what the researcher wants to emphasize. So let's read these last two paragraphs together. To sleep well, The AASM recommends that you have a relaxing nighttime routine and try to go to bed and wake up at the same time each day. It also recommends turning off electronic devices at least 30 minutes before bedtime and leaving your phone in another room. I'm not going to do that. No, I will keep my phone with me. So now let's combine all of these paragraphs and read the whole thing together one last time. It's late. You should really go to sleep. But the show you're watching is so good. You can watch another episode and still be okay for school or work tomorrow, right? If you've ever done this, you're not alone. In fact, it would be more surprising if you said you haven't done this. A 2023 survey for the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, AASM, found that nearly all Americans, 91% of them, say they have lost sleep by staying up later than they intended while binge watching videos and TV shows. And men are 30% more likely than women to say they do this often. Staying up late binge watching is most common among young people. About half of those aged 18 to 34 say they do it often, compared to just 14% of those aged 55 and above. It can be tempting to watch one more episode or scroll through one more viral video, said Alexandra Bro, a spokesperson for the AASM, but anything that keeps us from getting the recommended 7 hours of sleep each night can be harmful to our overall health. The survey of 2005 U.S. adults was done in March 2023. It also found that 3/4 of Americans have stayed up past their bedtime to shop online. When they have trouble sleeping, about half of Americans say they watch TV, and almost as many use their smartphone. 28% say they read, and the same number take a bath or a shower. To sleep well, the AASM recommends that you have a relaxing nighttime routine and try to go to bed and wake up at the same time each day. It also recommends turning off electronic devices at least 30 minutes before bedtime and leaving your phone in another room. I hope you enjoyed today's perfect pinpoint pronunciation practice and found some of these tips and tricks to be helpful in perfecting your American English pronunciation.
Welcome back to another episode of Up Close and Personal Pronunciation Practice. Today, let's talk about the difference between the P and F sound. So both of these letters make voiceless sounds, meaning if you feel right here, your voice box does not vibrate when you say it. So the biggest difference between these two sounds is for the F, you will bite your lip. And for the P, your lips will come together. So let's talk about some words where the meaning actually changes if you pronounce the incorrect sound. Pork, fork, pit, fit, apple, awful. So just remember, for the P, your lips come together. P. And for the F, you bite that bottom lip. You have to stop pronouncing focus wrong because you might actually be saying a really bad word. The correct pronunciation of focus has a long O. Focus. But the problem is a lot of people will actually do like a short U sound. And what happens when you say instead of O is it becomes focus. Now, if you are in a business meeting or if you're taking some kind of English exam like the TOEFL or the IELTS, you do not want to be saying focus. Oh, it's hard for me to focus on my homework. So, just remember, focus. Focus, not focus. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, follow, and share, and comment below what is something that helps you focus when you're trying to get some work done. I'll see you later. Oh my God, all my Brazilians say it. Focus. They say focus. Europeans and Brazilians say focus. I'm about to get cozy and watch some Friends, but first, let's talk about how to pronounce comfortable like an American English speaker. So the first thing to note about the natural pronunciation of comfortable is instead of all 4 syllables, comfortable, it's actually just 3. Comfortable. So we can take that O in the middle and pull it out. Another weird thing about the natural pronunciation of comfortable is you'll notice that I moved the R sound after the T. Originally it's comfortable, but to sound more natural, it's comfortable. 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 I'll see you later. I've got a super quick pronunciation lesson for you today on a word that is very commonly mispronounced. This word right here, juice, juice. So many people will say juice because it has that I in it, but it isn't juice, it is just juice. You can imagine that it's spelled Joos, juice. So the next time you're feeling thirsty and you want some vitamin C, grab yourself a tasty juice, not juice.
Today, we're going to do pronunciation practice with one of my favorite Christmas stories, The Night Before Christmas. This is an absolute classic, and actually this copy of the book has been in my family for quite a while. I think this is about 50 or 60 years old, so it's pretty special to me, and I personally like to read it every December 24th on Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas. So I'm very happy to be sharing it with you all today. So if this is your first time with one of my pronunciation lessons, here's what we do. We will go through this paragraph by paragraph or page by page and talk about all the different ways to pronounce the words and connect them together so you can sound as fluent as possible, just like a native English speaker. So without further ado, let's get started. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. Okay, let's talk about how to make this sound as natural and native as possible. So, with the, you don't really need to pronounce the whole thing, the. You can kind of just cut off the E and say the night before Christmas. With our vowel sounds like the A in all, you're going to connect it to the previous word, when all. Now with through, even though there is the GH, it still makes a vowel sound. Ooh, through. So you will still connect it to the next word, through the. And again with the, we're kind of going to take out that E and connect it. The house, the house. And again with not and we're going to connect it because of the A. Now with not and not you can actually do sort of a D sound. Nada, nada, not a creature. So again, we're going to connect that A with the C. A creature, a creature. Now looking at was and stirring, we have the same sound. Was, stirring. So with that, we're going to connect it. Was stirring. Not a creature, was stirring. And again, we have not and even. So we'll connect that. And we can make the T kind of a D sound. Not even. And we have the vowel again with a. Not even a. And a mouse. In our next sentence, the, like we mentioned before, we can kind of drop the E. The stockings. The stockings were hung, and then by, the Y makes a vowel sound. By. And with the, remember, we're going to kind of knock off that E a little bit. The chimney. With care, in hopes that saint. So the ST is short for saint. So you're going to say the whole thing. Saint Nicholas, that's Santa Claus. And we can see here with Nicholas and soon, it has that same sound. So we're going to connect it again. Saint Nicholas soon would be vowel sound. So we're going to connect it. Be there. Let's move on to the next page. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. Let's talk about how to pronounce it. So, again, we have our the. We'll drop this. The children. And then with all. Nestled all. We're going to connect this. Nestled all. Snug in. And we have our vowel again. Snug in. While visions of. Visions of. So we're going to connect the vowel as well. Visions of. And you'll notice with of, even though it's an F, it kind of makes a UV sound. Of. With danced and in, danced in. Danced in. And here with the CED in danced, this is going to make an ST sound. Danced. Danced. Danced in their heads. And mama in. Mama in. We're going to be connecting this a little bit as well. Mama in. With our next connection, and I. And I. We're going to be connecting that. And I in. So when we connect I in,
right here, it's going to make kind of an I-yin. I-yin. And I-yin, my cap. My cap. We have that vowel sound again. So we're going to connect it. My cap. Our next connection, fora. Fora. And along. A long winter's nap. Great. Let's look at the next page. When out on the lawn, there arose such a clatter. I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, and threw up the sash. Let's talk about it. When out. So we're going to connect this, when out, and then out on. When out on. When out on the lawn. And we have our the lawn. There arose. I know this can be a little tough because there's a lot of R's happening. There arose. There arose. But we are going to be connecting the A sound with the previous word. There arose. And here we have arose and such. So in arose, it is a voiced S, almost like a Z sound. And in such, it's the voiceless S. But we can still kind of connect it. There arose such a clatter. So we will connect it. And it's going to make kind of an SZ. There arose such a clatter. Arose such. And then here, such a, and a clatter. I sprang. So again, we're going to connect that. I sprang from my. We're going to connect from and my because they are the same sound. From my. And again, my bed because that Y has the vowel sound. To see what, to, right here. See what, to see what was the matter. And we're going to kind of drop the E. You'll notice with matter, it's going to have the D sound. Often, you'll see this with our TT, that it'll make a D sound. Matter, butter, that's a really common one. Butter, better. Sometimes the TT does sound like D. And then away to, we have this long A sound, away to the, and again we're going to drop the TH. The window I flew. So window, even though there's a W, it still makes a vowel sound, window. So window I flew. When we do this, like the O transition to another vowel sound, it'll make a W. So it's kind of like we're still using that W. To the window I flew. So it'll be like O, Y, window Y, window Y. And then, of course, we're going to say I flew. And we'll see here with flew, it also has that vowel sound. So we're going to connect it. I flew like a flash. So like and a flash. Tore open, there's another vowel sound. Tore open, and then the shutters, we're going to connect that. And here with shutters, you'll notice that D sound again. Shutters. Shutters and threw up. Threw up. So this is our vowel sound again. Threw up. This is also a phrasal verb. Threw up is used in a few ways.
threw up in this way is pushing something up or throwing something. It can also mean getting sick, threw up. So in the story, they're not getting sick. They're just throwing something up into the air. But also because it is a phrasal verb, you are going to say it quickly together. Threw up. And here, the sash. So we will connect that as well. Let's look at our next page. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be Saint Nick. Let's review it. So, the moon, we have talked about this many times. We've talked about these vowel sounds. Moon on the breast. And then we have our vowel of the new fallen snow. We already know all these vowels and the thes. So with this word, luster, it actually will make an ER sound. Sometimes you'll see this in British English. The American English version is luster, but sometimes with British and American English, the RE and ER can be switched. So with American English, you'll see luster, but with British English, it's luster. It has the same pronunciation though. So with one of these vowel connections, two objects. We talked about before when we connect the O sound, two objects, it kind of makes a W. So this is going to be like two wob. Two objects below. Let's look at the word miniature. So it looks like miniature. It isn't wrong to say it like this, but to sound more natural, you can just cut off that A. Miniature. And you'll also notice that the TU makes a CH. So it'll sound like miniature. And again, we see here the ST with Saint. And instead of saying Saint Nicholas, they just shortened his name to Nick. Saint Nick. Because it rhymes with quick. It's a poem after all. Let's look at the next page. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away all. So we already know our vowel connections and thes, so let's focus on a few different things. With whistled, even though there's a T, and ignore it. It isn't whistled, whistled, not whistled, whistled. With comet, it's sort of that karate chop. So we aren't going to say comet and continue pushing the air out. Your tongue in your mouth will still make the T shape, but you aren't going to continue pushing out the sound. Comet. So that will just be stopped. Comet. With Cupid, you will not do this kind of karate chop. With the voiced D, you do want to continue it. Cupid. So with voiceless T, comet. With voiced D, Cupid. So you will continue. With Blitzen,
blitzen, it's also that kind of karate chop T. So you're going to sort of cut it. Blitzen, blitzen, instead of blitzen, blitzen. Let's continue. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. So let's talk about how to make it sound natural. On this page, we have a lot more of that karate chop sound. So looking at that, as leaves that before, we're going to kind of chop it. That. Same with meet. When they meet with an obstacle, and with mount to, they have the same sound. So we're going to connect it. Mount to the sky, mount to the sky. Here with top, house top. This is going to be that same sort of karate chop sound that we did with T, top. Instead of top, top, top. So that will also kind of be cut. Top, to the house top. With the P sound, you really do need your lips to come together. Top, top. You do not want to make an F sound like f. Lips come together. Here again, we have saint, saint, and this time they're doing the full name, St. Nicholas. With the K in twinkling, it's kind of the same thing with the karate chop. Instead of twinkling, twinkling. So we're going to have 2 syllables in it. Twinkling, twinkling. It'll almost sound like there's a G. Twinkling, twinkling. In a twinkling. Now, sometimes this ing can be a little bit tough for people. So let's look at like prancing and pawing. If the ing is hard, think of it as sort of an EEN. Prancing, pawing. Now, eventually you do want to try to get the G at the end of it, but for now, if you think about the een, that's going to be pretty close. Now you'll notice that I pronounced roof and hoof in the same way. Technically, it's not hoof, it's hoof. Hoof. So it does sound a little bit different. But because this is a poem, all of these are supposed to rhyme at the end. So yes, I pronounced it incorrectly. But for the purpose of a poem, sometimes you have to do that. But just know, it's technically hoof. Hoof. Let's continue to the next page. He was dressed in all fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. Let's talk about it. So with fur, even though it's a UR sound, it does have the same pronunciation as ER, fur, fur. With clothes, I know this can be a little bit tricky because we have our TH and our S. Technically, you do want to do a little bit of a voiced TH before a voiced S sound. Clothes, clothes, clothes. But again, this can be kind of tough. So a nice little hack is to just say clothes, like
close a door. It's going to sound close enough, especially when you say it quickly. Close. And his clothes were all tarnished. His clothes were all tarnished. You can't really hear a difference. So just go ahead and say close, like close the door. With ashes, we do want to pronounce that ES at the end. So it's going to sound like shiz, ashes, ashes. With twinkled, similar to twinkling, we're going to sort of add a G sound. Twinkled, twinkled. So you can think of it as the ing, twinkled. Now this is not twinkled, twinkled. You're going to cut out that E. Twinkled. With roses, same with ashes. We are going to pronounce that ES, but it's going to sound like ziz. Roses, roses. Great, let's continue. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. Let's talk about it. So we talked before about how we do that karate chop cutoff. Here's the exception. When the word is followed by a vowel sound, you will not do the karate chop. So here we have stump and of. So if it was just by itself, stump, stump. But here there's the of, stump of, stump of. Same with tight in. I would generally say tight in, but you can say tighten his teeth, tighten his teeth. Now it's still going to be quick with tight, tighten, tighten his teeth. With little, little, this also has the D sound with the T's. So a little round belly. With laughed, even though there's all these extra letters of the GH and the E, it's actually going to have just an FT sound. Laughed, laughed. One interesting thing is you see here with bowl and full, the letters are different, but it has the same ending sound. The B and the F are different, so you want to be careful of that. With B, your lips come together. Bowl, bowl. And with F, with full, you're going to kind of bite your lip. Full, full. But the ending sound is the same. First two letters are not. The second part is. With right, right, it's also that kind of karate chop. So you're going to cut off your air. Right, right. You really do want to do that cut of your air though. It should not be rye jolly old elf. It does need to cut right jolly old elf. Another kind of interesting thing you'll notice in here is how we have different EA sounds. So here with wreath, wreath, this has an EE sound, wreath, the long E. But down here with head and dread, these do not have the same sound. Both of these just have a short E sound, head and dread. You have to be careful with the EA because it has so many different sounds to it, and the only way to really know what it is by memorizing the word. Let's continue. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. Let's discuss it. With spoke, he spoke not a word. Now with this, it is kind of in between that karate chop and saying it all the way. You could say spoke not a word, but you don't want it to be too long. So he spoke not a word. And then we'll hear that karate chop again 2 times in a row with but and went. But, went. With straight and to, they have the same sound, so we're going to connect them. Straight to, straight to. With turned, you want to be careful not to say turned. It's just turned, turned. So just an ND sound, turned. Like how you would say for and, that kind of same ND, and turned. With the ing, like with laying, finger, giving, again, you can kind of think about that EEN if it's a little bit easier. Laying, finger. Now again, having the G is best, but the EEN will suffice. Let's finish this up. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team, gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. So again, with whistle, you do not pronounce the T. Whistle, whistle. It's almost like whistle, whistle, whistle. And it's going to be the same for thistle, thistle. You won't do that T sound. And make sure with your TH that you have your tongue between your teeth. Thistle, thistle. This is kind of a weird one, but our TH and our S do have different shapes. So your tongue is between your teeth, and your tongue is behind your teeth. Thistle, thistle. Also, be careful with thistle and whistle that you're not doing an O sound for the L. I hear often whistle. That is not correct. You want to keep your mouth out. Ull, ull. Only your tongue is going to move. Whistle, thistle. So, sometimes as a cue that I'll give to my students is to actually hold your mouth out and keep it in place so you don't do that O sound. Thistle, thistle, whistle, whistle. Okay? If you're having some problems with it, try it out. Try actually holding your mouth out to the side. It's weird, but it helps. One last thing to point out, and like I mentioned before, with British English, it's a little bit different from American English. Here it says, Happy Christmas. This is more so British English. One of my favorite examples of this is in Harry Potter, where he says, Happy Christmas, Harry, and Happy Christmas, Ron. But in American English, it is actually Merry. Merry Christmas. Another thing that you'll commonly hear in the United States is Happy Holidays, because not everyone celebrates Christmas. So if you want an alternative, just in daily conversation, you could say Happy Holidays. But for this, it's just good to know the difference between British and American English. British English, Happy Christmas. American English, Merry Christmas. So now we have finished going through and looking at all the different ways that you can pronounce this to sound fluent and like a native English speaker. So let's go through and do the mirroring practice. So with this, I'm going to read the story out loud all the way through, and you can use this as an opportunity to listen and repeat. Listen and repeat as many times as you want. But I feel like we can make this a little more festive and a little more cozy to read this excellent Christmas book. So let's try something a little bit different. Much better. Let's get started. The Night Before Christmas by Clement C. Moore. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed in all fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his sack. And his eyes, how they twinkled! His dimples, how merry! His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." I hope you enjoyed this Christmas edition of my perfect pinpoint pronunciation practice. I'll see you later and have a Merry Christmas. Bye. Do you ever find yourself getting your tens and teens confused? Just remember this simple trick. For the numbers,
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
You want to emphasize the teen, 13, 15. And for your tens, such as
30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90.
you'll emphasize the first syllable. 30, 50, 80. With this little trick, you'll be able to speak more clearly and be able to understand what people are saying to you. I'll see you later.
Beach or bitch? How do you pronounce these words correctly so that you don't offend anyone? Or so that you can offend someone? Well, it's actually pretty easy. For beach, you're going to pull your mouth out to the side more. Beach, beach. But for bitch, the I is short. I. So you'll notice that my mouth is not going out. Bitch. But this is really not something that you should be too worried about because most likely in context, the listener is going to know what you're saying. So if you say, I'm going to the beach this weekend, people will know that you're going to the ocean or seaside. Whereas if you say, stop being a bitch, they'll know that you're not talking about the sandy place next to the ocean.
Today, let's talk about the differences between advantageous and advantages. So, first of all, you can notice that their pronunciation is a little bit different. For advantageous, it is advantageous, and advantages is advantages. They also have different uses. For advantageous, it is an adjective. So in a sentence, we could say, learning English is advantageous for your career. With advantages, it is a plural noun. So you could use it in a sentence like this. Learning English has many advantages. Make sense? Make sure to like and follow to become a member of the Cammie's English Corner family so that you can get closer to achieving your English goals.
Congratulations on conquering today's entire pronunciation masterclass. So, in the comments section, I want to know which pronunciation tip did you find to be the most helpful? But don't forget, if you would like private pronunciation practice with yours truly, head on over to cammiesenglishcorner.com and book your lesson today.